Denmark's left finally solved immigration. Now, what's interesting about the Denmark situation is that I would like to say that they're always a few years ahead of the rest of Europe. They were a liberal government, more left leaning than even conservative leaning, and they realized right away where their voter base was turning. And I would say probably around 2015 they started making some policy decisions like from the left side of their party because they realized that the right radical party was starting to gain traction. I personally don't like calling the conservative parties radical. I know that's a term in Europe that they do all the time. I genuinely don't believe that these parties are radical. They just have a difference of a beliefs that people disagree with, so they tend to just to call them radical and name call them whatever they want. But this party figured it out right away. They knew that they were going to lose the election on this immigration policy right there. They realized it, they adjusted, they switched their policy, and apparently, which again, I know a little bit about it. I'm sure this video is going to do a great job explaining it. They've done a great job fixing their issue, and that's what's kept them in power. And I think a lot of European parties are going to have to wake up and realize this. And look, like we're dealing with the same issue in America right now, and I can rant all about how the GOP is failing Trump on a lot of issues. Trump's trying to get shit done. GOP, which is the Republicans for the Europeans that don't know, is pretty much doing whatever they can. Like the old school rhinos are really getting in the way of a lot. This party, though, figured it out right away. So, and for a quick channel shout out, because this guy obviously is a way bigger account than I do, The Arrow. He makes great content. I love these like documentary news style videos. So please give his channel love and support. This guy makes great content.
Until just a few years ago, nobody would have imagined that this woman would lead Europe's anti-immigration agenda. She's Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, from the Social Democratic Party, seen by many as a model for
I also think it's interesting that we're seeing like a lot more women. Like I think everyone assumes that it's going to be a man. Like, oh yeah, a man's going to be like the leading this alt-right thing. No, I mean, dude, we're seeing women. I mean, we got what's her name, Giorgie Meloni. I probably butchered that. I don't want to be disrespectful. The Italian Prime Minister. I know the AFD in Germany, or ADF. I think it's the AFD in Germany. Their conservative party has a woman as in charge of that. The French party, in the conservative one, has a woman in charge of that one. So yeah, this isn't like just a male thought, and I want to clear that up right away. Both sides of the gender aisle agree with this one. This is an issue. Like, so let's get that nonsense out right away.
left parties across the continent. And in a speech as head of the presidency of the Council of the European Union, she said things like this.
We need, of course, to be in control of our own borders. Who can enter and stay in our countries, that needs to be a democratic decision. And I will be very frank, people coming outside who commit serious crimes and do not respect our value and way of life, I don't think they have a place in Europe.
Why is that controversial? Like, genuinely, I'm asking, like, the people, why is this a controversial topic? People who come over, people who don't respect your culture, who don't respect your ideology, why do you want them there? Look at Denmark. Look how pretty Denmark is. Do you really want to ruin that? With people who are going to come over and tell you how to think and what to do? Hell no. Where's the common sense? And look, these parties are going to have to wake up right away and figure out where everyone's pushing, because we've all been in this mindset that we've had to accept, we've had to be multicultural, we've had to force these certain ideals and beliefs down our throats. But now people are getting sick of it. There was a level of tolerance that people had that they were very okay with dealing with. They're like, they just, Europeans and Americans, we had a very high tolerance to this multiculturalism. We've been told that this is what we have to do for our success. Well, from 1921 to 1970, the United States actually had a negative migration. People were leaving. We didn't want people here. We weren't taking in massive amounts of immigrants. We weren't taking massive amounts of foreign-born. The foreign-born population numbers are actually decreasing in America during that timeline. And you can argue, Actually, it's, I think, a little bit, you don't really want to, there's not really much disputing it, but you can easily phone and realize that, yes, immigration in these parts of the world, or specifically when I'm referring to the United States, the economy was better. The culture was better. Everything about what we were dealing with was a better time. So now, when we have relatively, I'd say, what, 20 or around 20 years, if I'm generalizing, we've had about 20 years of just strict immigration policy, or I guess not strict immigration policy, and now we've seen the effects of that. Like specifically Generation Z and probably parts of millennials are now waking up to the idea going, wait a minute, 30, 40 years ago we weren't doing it. Now we're doing it. Now we have H-1B visas. Now we have immigrants that are replacing pretty much Americans in a lot of ways. And Europe is dealing with the same problem. That's why I think it's fascinating. You're going to get Europeans who are going to get very defensive over this. Like, oh, an American telling us what's up. Well, I have freedom of speech here in my country, right? Most of you guys do. Half of you guys really don't. Half of you guys are going to go away to jail for bullshit petty crimes, and you can't tweet online for the UK. So we're seeing a censorship overload in Europe right now because they don't want people questioning this. Now, the real issue, or the real question is, what country will adapt? What parties will adapt? Who will see the writing on the wall in these countries and go, look, we need to get this shit fixed out real quick and stop fighting Donald Trump on these immigration numbers and on the population replacement numbers? Because really what we're talking about right now. We're talking about defending American homeland. We're talking about defending Europe. We're talking about defending what culturally these countries and areas represent. That shouldn't be a disputed topic. That shouldn't be some controversial thing that for some reason people want to sit here and go and argue about. Because they want to have this like feel-good side. Because at the end of the day, this is what annoys me about a lot of these people who don't want to look at this issue with like a sense of realism, is that you guys can go to bed at night thinking, oh, I'm doing the politically correct thing. I feel good. Everything is great. And I'm going to go to bed at night knowing that there's half of the other country that desperately cares about this issue. That's the issue. That's a real problem. When you live in these first world countries, we almost get caught in the first world bubble. Because how do you not? Why are we acting like that? You living in Europe, living in America isn't like, you got a good shot at life. Like when you came into the world, if you got born in Europe and America, you got a good chance of being successful, or at least living above the economic average around the world. Because again, you go to some parts of Africa, you go to some parts of Asia, there's people making like $25 to $50 a month. So think about that for a second. What you guys spend on a video game, what we spend on comic books, what we spend on everything, that's a lot of people's paychecks for an entire month. So yeah, we have the privilege to be thinking this way. But if sometimes these privileges will have consequences at the end of it, and we're going to see that, and we're going to see what Denmark really did to fix that.
Denmark is known as one of the happiest, safest, most equal, and most progressive countries on the planet. For decades, it was held up as an example of openness, solidarity, and
interesting,
strong
right? Most
welfare
progressive
state.
and whatever.
But
welfare
something
state.
changed
Interesting, right?
when the leader of the party that built that model started pushing for zero refugees, mass deportations, and strict border control. How did such a progressive country, governed by a center-left coalition, end up implementing one of the toughest migration policies in Europe? This is the story of a country that decided to protect its social cohesion, even if it meant breaking one of the most sacred values of its own identity. And to understand why Denmark now defends its welfare by closing its borders, we first need to understand how the idea of protecting it at all costs was born. During the Second World War, Denmark was occupied by the Nazis. And when the Nazis decided to deport the Jews to concentration camps, the Danish population stopped it. In a matter of days, fishermen, priests, doctors, and families organized an underground operation to move the Jews out of the country in small boats to Sweden, which was a neutral country. More than 7,000 people were rescued by their own neighbors. It wasn't a religious or political cause, it was something much deeper. The Jews were, above all, Danes, and they were protected as part of the community. This episode explains part of the country's identity. In Denmark, people know that the survival of a small country depends on the strength of its community. And for them, social cohesion isn't an abstract idea, it's a historical practice. When the war ended, there was a broad political commitment to build a solid welfare state, able to guarantee stability. stability and security for all citizens.
See, that's a key part right there. I want to deep dive a little bit. See, like, in theory, right? Like, you can gauge my political opinions all you want. You can say I'm one way, you can say I'm the other. I want a social welfare state. I would love to have all these great amenities and resources. And by the way, I live in America, so we do have every financial means necessary to do it. The problem is when you got constant politicians taking money from, for us was welfare and Social Security, and they mess with Medicaid. They don't. We have all these systems in place that are not benefiting really Americans. Like, I'll never see a drop of Social Security. I know that. I'm actively paying into a system that I know when I get to that retirement age, I will not see a dollar of that. The problem is that we now have a massive influx of people who are entering Western countries who are taking from the pot. They are not putting back into the pot. Like, we can talk about the Somalia situation in Minnesota, and how 40 to 60% of them are on welfare or some form of assisted living. That's an issue. We got money getting drained out faster than we got money putting in. And then you want to add on top of the population birth rate crisis in all these countries. So now we're not even seeing a proper replacement of the citizens who are retiring. These are going to create issues. And this is what I really want to try to express to the people who tend to lean more left, is that, yes, we want these things, don't we? But we won't be able to get them if we're too busy fronting the bill for people who aren't even living here. And at the same time, we are a bit too busy fronting the bill for people who don't want to really be Americans. They just want to come over here and tell you, well, this is my culture, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how it's going to be. And then when they get elected to Congress, and then they even want to tell you even more how to think and how to breathe and what to do. These are clear, obvious issues that we need to get addressed. And Europe is dealing with the same issue. They went after the war. They wanted to create these social welfare programs, and they were able to do that because of the people living there. They paid into the system, they worked hard, and then they received the reward. Now you got our generations who are getting brought up into this world, and we're now starting to realize that, hey, the math ain't mathing up. Like, you got Chicago taking out $500 million of debt to pay and subsidize all the immigrant crisis that we have going on in Chicago. So what about the citizens? What about the black community? What about the white community? What about the Latino community? We got a lot of people struggling in Chicago that you're now just forgetting about because now you got a new voter base that you're trying to get. That's the key part. People need to understand that this ain't a left, this ain't a Republican, this ain't a left versus right issue. This is a class issue. This is a people issue. We are now, the young people, the Gen Zers, the millennials, the Gen Xers. I'll throw them in there because they've been screwed over just as much as all of us. We're all seeing now the effects of what these policies and what these things do, and it's not working. It's failing. We are losing so much money on these immigrants. It's ridiculous. And by the way, my family does come from immigrants. I'm Italian and Greek. I'm third generation Italian and Greek, or third generation American. My family, when they came over here, they didn't get handouts. They didn't get anything. They came off the boat. They said, "Welcome to America. Figure it out." And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, what he did is that he used to run he came over here, had a fruit stand, worked at that, and then he built that up to being a restaurant. He had a restaurant. And then after he had the restaurant for a few years, he then bought apartments, 2 apartments for Greeks to come over here and have a place to live, have a place to stay for a few months so they can get their feet off the ground. It was all community driven. It was not government handouts. That's a key difference. Community versus government handouts. Because he felt obligated to do that. He was like, I want to help my Greeks get over here. And by the way, they did Catholic Greeks and Italians in the 1920s. They didn't want any more of us here. So we dealt with the same discrimination and the same issues that all these modern day immigrants are dealing with. The difference is that we shared culturally a lot with the Americans. Mainly was faith-based. Us being, a majority Catholic and Orthodox people, we share a lot of fundamental beliefs with Americans. So that's why the transition coming over to America, the assimilation was easier. They picked up the language. They learned the language. Now 3 generations removed, I can't speak Italian. I can't speak Greek. That's because there was an emphasis on being American, Americanizing with the culture. That's not a thing here. We don't do that anymore. Europe stopped doing that as well, for the sake of not cultural appropriation and not going after certain groups. No, you don't want to see your culture die. Plain and simple.
Free and universal education, an accessible and efficient healthcare system, public housing policies, and a safety net for the unemployed. In the following decades, the country went through a period of economic growth driven by light industrialization, the modernization of agriculture, and the expansion of the public sector. The so-called Danish model of collective bargaining made it possible to set wages and working conditions through consensus, which raised productivity and reduced social conflict. By the mid-1960s, Denmark had become a model of prosperity built on social cohesion and mutual trust.
Social cohesion, mutual trust. Like I've said repeatedly on my social media accounts, we all want to live in a high trust society. I don't want to go to a Walmart and have to go, hey, Mr. or Miss Attendant, can you please unlock the cage so I can get my shampoo and conditioner? Like, what the fuck are we dealing with? Why are we accepting these as normalcy? They're not.
It was a homogeneous society where almost the entire population shared the same language, religion, customs, and a social contract in which every individual had a clear place. At first glance, it looked like an indestructible fortress.
Who would have thought?
But economic growth was creating an unexpected pressure. Denmark needed more workers than its own population could provide. That's why, in 1967, the government signed its first recruitment agreements for foreign workers with Turkey, Pakistan, and Yugoslavia. These workers were called Haustarbeiter, guest workers. The idea was that they would temporarily fill the less attractive jobs in factories, ports, construction sites, and services, and then go back to their home countries. At first, the numbers were small, but they grew steadily. By 1973, shortly before the oil crisis put an end to these recruitment programs, it's estimated that there were between 30,000 and 40,000 Haustarbeiter in the country. At the time, there weren't major tensions. The economy was growing, unemployment was low, and the scale of the phenomenon was manageable. But what started as a temporary solution would become the starting point for a demographic shift that would shape the coming decades. Because in the 1980s, immigration changed, when new arrivals no longer came for work, but were fleeing wars and persecution. The country started receiving refugees from Iraq and Iran.
So, instead of these countries receiving hardworking people, they started receiving like people who are coming over here just for the sake of like, I need to work, I need to make money, I'm trying to better myself. And you know what? They probably had a lot of skills too, to an extent, right? But then you started just receiving an influx of refugees. And let's be honest, guys, we know that not every single refugee is a high-skilled labor or is really a quality citizen. And that's not me saying all. I'm just saying we know that there's a few bad apples in the batch. We know. We all know. The numbers don't lie. The stats don't lie. Look them up if you guys really want to disagree with it.
And displaced by the Islamic Revolution of 1979 and the war that went on through the 1980s.
Iran, by the way. That's what he's talking about.
Somalis also arrived, escaping the civil war that broke out in 1988, along with Palestinians and Lebanese affected by the conflicts in the Middle East. In the 1990s, the breakup of Yugoslavia and the war in Bosnia forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee, and Denmark took in tens of thousands of them. Immigration stopped being marginal. In working-class neighborhoods and big cities, foreign-origin communities began to form, concentrated almost entirely in large public housing complexes. These neighborhoods had been designed to promote equality, but concentration ended up producing the opposite effect.
Really? Who would have thought?
Where Danish stopped being the main language,
what?
And where local customs lost visibility.
Oh, how do we...
The labor market was the...
How could we have predicted that? Who would have thought? Not me.
Main breaking point.
Like, you can only say this shit so many times.
Employment rates among immigrants stayed persistently below those of Danes. Language barriers, the difficulty of getting foreign qualifications recognized, and the lack of social networks slowed their entry into formal work. Many ended up depending on state benefits for long periods.
Wow. So, yeah, people coming over here, Now it's even harder for them to get jobs because now there's more of competition for them to get these lower skilled labor jobs. So what happens to all the people that don't get the jobs? Oh, then now they get put on the welfare program. And that's taking money from what could go to Danish citizens. Like, again, right there is the issue.
Which strained the core of the Danish welfare model. Schools became the second alarm bell. In some neighborhoods, most children didn't speak Danish, and in some schools, more than 80% of students had an immigrant background.
80%?
Teachers reported difficulties in transmitting basic norms of Danish civic culture, like punctuality, gender equality, or respect for the teacher's authority. What had initially been seen as multiculturalism started to look like the creation of parallel communities marked by marginalization. Security finally solidified these worries. In several neighborhoods, the police reported a growing presence of informal groups exercising social control. It wasn't just crime, it was territorial control. Entire areas where
almost like if you start importing a third world, your country starts seeing third world issues. Like problems that Denmark never had to deal with. Like we saw earlier in the video how it mentioned, I ranted about it, but he clarified it too. We saw earlier that there was a sense of Danish culture was social cohesion. They understood one another. There was like culturally, they may be different, right? Like I said, they brought up the Jews and then brought up Danish people as separate. Like, yeah, they may be different, but they're united under one flag. They're one people. Now when you get when you're been importing because of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, then you have a bunch of people coming over here who aren't coming over here for the sake of, I want to be Danish. They're coming over there for the sake that, oh, I just want to take all the money and I just want a place to go flee. Like, again, we know what they're doing. Half of them say that they would rather support their homeland. Like, in the United States, when you come over here, we have one very simple rule. You have to pretty much renounce that you would, or, renounce your home country and say that you would be fully supported of America if for the sake of a war with your home country. They all say yes, but then when you hear them talk, you're getting a whole different story. I'm not saying that this is the case, I'm just relating it to some modern day issues. And now we're seeing that, oh wow, like segregation in Denmark pretty much, throwing all the foreign-borns in one side of the area, social and wealth inequality is going to be all over that place. So now because they're going to be socially inequality, wealth inequality, now they're going to be like doing gangs and some violence and some crimes because that's all half of them know. So when you start importing these issues, we're going to now start creating issues. Like there's a way to have proper immigration. There's a way to have checks and balances so you know who's coming in and who's not. Half of these countries didn't even do that, and I'm including the United States in on that one. We all didn't do it for the sake of multiculturalism, for the sake of feel-good policies. And it's ended up hurting a lot of us, Western cultures. It's hurt a lot.
the police needed reinforcements just to enter. The scale of
Think
the
about
change
that.
was clear.
Police need help
In
just to go
1985,
deal with this.
only about 3
There's parts of their country that aren't even speaking Danish. Like, look, if I live in Denmark, if I picked up right now and moved to Denmark, there's from my end, at least for me personally, there's an expectation for me to want to learn the Danish culture, to understand the language. If I was moving to a country that they don't, like, yeah, I know they all speak English over there, so I know it'd be okay with, I'd be able to make do for the most part. But why would I go, oh yeah, they all speak English, so I don't have to learn Danish? That makes no sense at all. Like, you should be expected to have to pick up the language if you want to live there and be a part of their society. Like, again, common sense. And I do believe one day common sense will prevail. It's just going to take time. And it's going to take people listening and understanding these things.
3%
and that
of the
takes time in
population
itself.
was made up of immigrants or children of 2 immigrant parents. By the late 1990s, they already made up more than 8%.
Wow.
For a small, highly homogeneous country, the impact was fast and geographically concentrated.
Almost like what we're seeing
Soon,
now in
what had
America.
begun as a problem of integration in specific neighborhoods turned into a broader debate about national cohesion. In this context, the 2001 elections brought to power a center-right coalition led by the Liberal Party, Venstre, which would govern until 2011. For the first time in 80 years, the Social Democrats were no longer the biggest party, and immigration became the central issue in the political debate.
Like I said earlier, Denmark is ahead of the game on a lot of us. You know, they did. So what we're all going through right now in the UK, America, and all this stuff, they're about 10, 15 years ahead of all of us. The way they've been dealing with these issues.
Denmark hardened its laws on asylum and family reunification, reduced financial benefits for newcomers, tightened residency requirements, and introduced criteria aimed at limiting immigration from outside Europe. This shift was
all
built
makes
on
sense
the
to
idea
me.
that social cohesion was a limited resource, and that the welfare state, to keep functioning, needed newcomers to adapt fully. But soon,
You're not fully
the argument
committed.
stopped
Get
being
out.
exclusive to the radical
Plain and
right,
simple.
as other political forces, even on the left, started to admit that the open door model was at risk and that limits had to be set. Denmark was no longer debating whether it should restrict immigration, but to what extent and under what conditions it should do so.
Yeah, so the outcome became like, look, this is a non-negotiable outcome. We got to do something. It's pretty much what they did.
Then, in 2010, the country went a step further when the government officially introduced the so-called ghetto list. It wasn't just a rhetorical label, but a legal tool with specific criteria. A neighborhood would be considered a ghetto if more than 50% of its residents were of non-Western origin, if its unemployment rate was higher than the national average, if education levels were low, and if crime rates were above the national average. The decision was controversial. While in other countries, governments avoided directly linking immigration and crime, Denmark made that link explicit.
So countries would rather just falsify their information, lie to their people for the sake of feel-good politics. But then when people figure this shit out, and then they start getting angry over it, then you're going to play the name game and call them whatever you want. This is right here the biggest fucking issue. You have governments that are actively going against their own citizens. Governments who are, the point of a government is supposed to represent the people, in democracy at least. And that's not happening. I'm relating it to modern day because clearly it's happening more in Denmark, but it's not happening across the board. It's not happening in most of Western culture, Western countries. It's not. Like, we can talk on it. We'll probably watch a few videos about France because that one was that's a whole other side topic.
Behind these
talking about
increasingly tough
France.
policies, there was an economic calculation. The sustainability of the welfare state depends on most of the population contributing more than they receive. That balance started to crack when the numbers showed a clear difference between natives and immigrants. According to official figures from the Ministry of Finance, Danes of native origin contributed a positive net fiscal amount of around 41 billion Danish kroner per year.
Respect.
Meanwhile, groups of non-Western origin showed a negative net contribution of about 24 billion.
So where's the benefit? I would love for people to try to tell me like that this is totally beneficial and there's no issues in this. And this is what I mean, like when countries aren't talking about the stats and they don't want to really publish their stats because they know the issue is. And unfortunately, I'm not trying to be attacking one side over the other here. I do genuinely value myself as a centralist. But at the end of the day, this is my biggest like issue with some of these liberal parties. Is that they're too busy caught in on the political garbage. All the words and what to say, what you can't say, what you can and can't do, what's good and bad, that they're literally just forgetting about the issue as a whole. Some of these conversations are tough conversations to have, point blank. Some of these conversations are not going to be easy. So when the numbers are obviously, when I look at that and I just go, that is minus $24 billion that could go towards Danish citizens. And we can even relate it to America. Like I could say there's $500 million, right, that Mayor Johnson spent on immigration in 1 year. Now the CTAs desperately in need of financing. Illinois, or the Chicago deficit is facing a $1.2 billion deficit. The state of Illinois is dirt broke. So the roads aren't better. I-80 is still under construction. So where has this worked? Like I really want to, because like, you know, where's all this money going, right? We pay one of the highest taxes in Illinois. Denmark pays extremely high taxes. So if we're all paying just incredibly high taxes, where's the money going? I don't know. getting
The
funneled.
migration debate stopped being abstract and became central to the viability of the Danish model.
They had
In
to unify
2011,
on
the
this.
Social Democrats returned to power after a decade of liberal governments, and many people expected a change of direction. They thought the new government would relax migration restrictions, eliminate the toughest requirements, or make it easier to obtain residence permits. But the exact opposite happened. The Social Democrats didn't roll back any of the measures introduced by the
Why
right
would
between
they?
2001
Easy
and
wins.
2011. They kept them in place. And in some cases, they even strengthened them, tightening access to citizenship and more closely linking social benefits to active job seeking. For the first time, the Danish left openly embraced an idea that until then had belonged to the right. Without social cohesion and labor market integration, the welfare state isn't sustainable.
Common sense will prevail. It just takes time.
In this context, in 2015, at the height of the European migration crisis, Denmark received more
What a
than
joke that was.
21,000 asylum applications in a single year. It was a huge pressure for a country of just 6 million
I was about to say,
inhabitants,
that's
with
like-
a system designed for stability, not for massive inflows. While other European countries improvised solutions, Denmark responded by tightening its laws even more, with the center-right back in power, but now with a very broad political consensus. Social benefits for asylum seekers were reduced, border
Good.
controls were reinforced,
Good.
and above all, the message was sent that national cohesion came first.
Shocking. Again, these are undisputable topics. People will argue them. People will try to tell you what you should think and how to think. But these, at the end of the day, are just non-negotiables.
In 2016, the so-called jewelry law was passed, a controversial rule that allowed authorities to confiscate cash or valuables from people
Nick
requesting
Fuentes got a little
asylum.
flack for that word.
The official goal was to make refugees
Where's the
help
flag
pay
on
for their own
Denmark?
stay, while also sending a clear message that Denmark wouldn't be a comfortable destination for those hoping to settle in Europe. The government even published ads in Lebanese newspapers explicitly warning about the new restrictions, in a deliberate attempt to discourage potential applicants before they began their journey. Faced with the biggest migration crisis in decades, Denmark defended the idea that solidarity has limits and that the social contract had to be protected, even at the cost of controversial measures like the ban on the burqa and
Good.
niqab in public spaces
Good.
passed by Parliament
If you guys can see my face and you come to my country, I expect to see your face too. Ain't no one hiding.
in 2018, a decision that made it clear that cultural adaptation as part of integration wasn't optional.
I agree.
By 2018,
It's your
the gang
country.
list included 29 neighborhoods spread across major cities. Names like Volsmose, Gellerup, or Tingbjerg became synonyms for exclusion, unemployment, and violence. These were urban enclaves where common rules and values had stopped applying, and the state's response to this situation was drastic. Plans were approved to demolish public housing blocks and relocate the families living in them, with the goal of mixing the demographic makeup. Crimes committed in these areas began to carry tougher penalties than in the rest of the country.
And that's okay. Like, that's okay. If there's more of a problem in these certain areas, you go after them. You take care of them. You nip it in the butt before it gets too bad, and then it gets too much where it's like now half the fucking country starts doing it.
And the state made it mandatory for children from these neighborhoods to attend public daycare from the age of 1 for
Good.
at least 25 hours a week to learn Danish and basic
Good.
social values.
No issues with that.
Families who didn't comply could see their benefits reduced.
Deport.
The plan was clear. Eliminate foreign enclaves inside the country and set a goal that by 2030, no neighborhood should have more than 30% non-Western residents.
I
In 2019,
100%
the
agree
Social
with that.
Democrats
Again,
returned to power after an election campaign built on promises to keep the migration restrictions introduced by the right and even strengthen them.
so what they did, guys, is that, like I said, I mentioned this earlier, they knew what direction the country was going in. Because you know what? The numbers don't lie at the end of the day. Unfortunately, they tell the truth in some areas. Obviously, there's nuances to some of it, but overall, the numbers don't lie. And they knew right away that they would never seek power again if they didn't switch. And that's what Democrats in America need to start doing. If you guys want, like, they may win midterms just because of how the GOP's been totally fucking up and not getting shit done, and everyone's been seeing the fucking clown show that it's been there. Just like Trump's first term, he tries to get shit done, and then you got the rhinos who don't like Trump doing everything they can to fuck that up. So the Democrats have an opportunity here in America to switch. If they were just to come back a little bit, and the Republicans could come this way a little bit, then it would actually be great. We would see genuine things getting done. The Democrats need to switch their policy and stop doing this like caring for all type thing, and then remember who they actually should care about, which is Americans, specifically middle class voters. And now we're seeing the black community and multiple communities are also now getting affected by these immigration numbers. Like Democrats don't care about the black community anymore. They don't care about the votes for the black community. They're now looking for new voters. And by the way, I'm not saying that the Republicans care either. Clear as day that they don't give a shit either. And this is the problem we're dealing with, is that we have politicians from both sides of the aisle who are in government, and they don't give a shit about us. They don't give a shit about what we're going through. They would rather just make their money, stock trade, and everyone go, oh, look at the S&P 500. It's going great. Everything's up in the world. But then if you take out the 7 biggest companies, specifically the AI companies like NVIDIA, Tesla, brain farting right now on a few. But yeah, you take out like the 7 biggest companies, the stock market in America didn't grow. There was no growth. If you take out all the AI companies that have built data centers, our GDP didn't even grow at all. So we're getting like, go ahead. You can shove the numbers down all of us, and go, oh, look, the stock market's going great. This is going great. Well, okay, 20% of people control 80-something% of the market. The rest is all divvied up amongst the rest of us who are slightly invested in it. But the numbers only really affect the rich and the elites. They don't matter to the average Joe because we're all still feeling the repercussions of inflation. We're still feeling the repercussions of the housing crisis, which is what immigration has led to. The problem is that we've been told to believe in that we have to accept everyone. We've almost forgotten American citizens along the way. And now we're all struggling. We're all looking for opportunity. We're all looking to eat in a lot of ways, but now we can't. Because we see our politicians caring more for others and people who are not citizens, and the citizens are actually living here. We got plenty of homeless here. We got plenty of homeless veterans here. We got a lot of veterans who come back from these wars and they don't get help. They don't get mental help. We got people in our jail system who are literally who are repeated offenders, sometimes on really bullshit crimes, but instead of us asking the question why they keep doing it and maybe what can we do to help rehabilitate, we don't believe in that here in America, unfortunately. We believe in punishment. We don't believe in rehabilitation. I would love to see rehabilitation. Because a lot of these people just come from broken backgrounds and broken family homes, which is a whole side conversation. They just want help. They just want opportunity. They want someone to listen to them. And the government, in theory, is designed to help citizens. The government should have programs and things in place where it provides easy job opportunities for growth. Financial relief, if applicable. And you know what? Again, as someone who tends to lean more conservative, I have very liberal policy on certain things. That's okay, because I'm pro-America at heart. I'm pro-country cultures at heart. That's why I speak so heavily about these European politics, is because I am pro their countries being their countries. We don't want to see demographic switches to where I look around the neighborhood and I can't even recognize half of my people anymore. These are the issues that we need to start tackling as a society and going, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this good? Is this bad?
And that promise had a name, Matt Fredrickson. Fredrickson understood the cultural shifts the country was going through earlier than anyone else. Direct, pragmatic, and unafraid to challenge ideological dogmas, she presented herself to voters with a clear message. Protecting the Danish social model meant controlling who could enter. Defending the welfare system was no longer about opening the doors to everyone, but about preserving internal cohesion. With her in power, Denmark pushed a political goal of reducing asylum applications to 0.
Good.
It wasn't just about tightening requirements or speeding
asylums,
up
all that stuff
it was
been
about
so used and abused now. Half of these countries aren't war torn anymore.
Immigration through asylum was no longer a path to a new life in Denmark, but a temporary protection.
Also, again, and this is how I view this with these all these asylum people are just fleeing their home countries. You could instead be there and fix your own country. But you guys would rather just all run away to Europe and fuck it up.
The explicit expectation of going back to the country of origin as soon as possible. Those who obtained protection no longer received stable status, but temporary permits of 1 or 2 years, subject to regular reviews.
Good. That's how it
Each
should
case
be.
was reassessed, and if the situation in the country of origin improved, protection was revoked.
Good. Send them
In
back.
2021, Denmark revoked the residence permits of 453 Syrian refugees. The official justification was that areas like Damascus and its surroundings were no longer considered dangerous enough to keep offering international protection.
I agree.
According to the government, if the war had receded in those areas, then the humanitarian obligation had been fulfilled. They were moved to
And
departure
that's also a big issue, is that there's a lot of international law. A lot of it was more meant for what happened with the Holocaust after World War II. And a lot of these international laws were meant in place for really like Jewish citizens and some war-torn European countries to find relocation. But now we've seen a lot of these international laws used and abused for the sake of political correctness instead of actual problems. I don't know if I'm making sense there, but we're definitely seeing these laws get used and abused where these countries have to obligate to these things, but they're forsaking their own country's cohesion and their own country's stability because of these international laws. It's grown. There's some scrutiny you can easily draw there and go, is this all great? Forcing people to take someone from another country that has no sense of culture. It's one thing when you take someone from Sweden and move them to Denmark. It's another thing when you take someone from Syria and move them to Denmark. Total difference. Total night and day difference. And if people are going to argue that, that's a stupid point to dispute.
facilities with limited rights, where they had to wait until they could be deported or agreed to leave voluntarily. The change wasn't only legal, it was doctrinal, and official language stopped talking about integration and replaced it with self-sufficiency and return.
See how little words
The goal
make
was
a
no
difference?
longer to turn newcomers into future Danish citizens, but to make sure they could support themselves while they stayed and were ready to go back as soon as possible. As part of this new doctrine, the state started offering money to leave. Any immigrant or refugee with a residence permit could request financial compensation to return voluntarily to their country of origin. The state covered travel costs and paid up to 225,000 Danish kroner, about 30,000 euros, to help with reintegration. If a person didn't have a long-term future in Denmark, it was better, from the state's point of view, to pay for their return than to support them indefinitely through the welfare system.
It makes sense.
This wasn't just a tweak, it was a new way of thinking about immigration. Much more demanding and selective, built on three
that's
main
kind of what we're
pillars.
doing now.
The first is integration.
Trump started doing
Since
that.
2023,
I think almost like 1 million people took that offer. It's like you take the money, you leave, and then you have an opportunity to go through the normal immigration process and get American citizenship. Now, reforming a lot of these programs is something that desperately needs to happen, and that's what the Republicans have always lacked. They do a lot of the enforcing right, but they don't do the reform part right at all. At all. They don't even believe in reform, and that's the problem with the GOP.
have had to accept a job within 3 months. The goal is no longer to study first in training programs or learn Danish before doing anything else. The idea is to work first and learn while working. Integration isn't a voluntary gesture. It's a condition for accessing the welfare system.
Yeah.
Those who don't comply see their benefits reduced or even cut off.
Good.
The second pillar is citizenship is a hard-to-reach goal. Becoming a Danish citizen isn't an automatic right. It's a long and demanding process that usually requires between 9 and 12 years of legal residence. On top of that, applicants must pass an advanced language test, another test on Danish history and culture,
common
and
sense.
prove economic independence.
Common sense.
Their criminal record is also checked.
They should.
The third pillar is strict limits on family reunification, meaning that bringing relatives is heavily restricted.
Yeah.
To apply, a person must be at least 24 years old, have their own income and housing, and deposit 59,000 Danish kroner, about 7,700 euros.
So they're
as a
pretty much
guarantee.
just financially making it harder for, like, they're not entirely shutting it down. They're just like, well, no, if you want to do some of these things, look, you're going to have to pay for it. Sorry. We're done giving you money. You need to start giving us money. Very simple.
On top of that, there are long waiting times that, in practice, mean many reunifications never happen. In the years that followed, Denmark pushed this logic even further. In 2022, Parliament passed a law allowing the full outsourcing of the asylum process.
Wow.
Under this law, someone who applies for asylum in Denmark can be sent to a safe third country, like Rwanda, with which the government signed an agreement so that their claim is processed there, not on Danish soil.
That's fine.
The message was explicit. Asylum no longer meant automatic access
I mean,
to
look,
the country.
I don't know how that's. I don't know what the political issue with that in Rwanda is. Let's just assume that if they're supportive of that, great. But if I was also Rwandan, I don't know if I would want that. Just saying. Gotta be fair
Even
there.
if the claim was approved, Denmark didn't have to grant residence, and protection could be provided in the country hosting the processing center.
Oh, that works.
For the government, the goal was to cut off the incentive to physically reach Denmark as a gateway into the welfare state.
Good.
All these measures led to concrete results. In 2024, Denmark recorded a historically low number of asylum approvals. Just 864 people.
Wow.
One of the lowest rates in the entire
From like, what was it they say earlier? 40,000 to 60,000 at one point?
European Union. But these results are just as striking as the political shift behind them. In recent years, in most of Europe, public frustration over immigration is translated into the rise of right-wing parties that use the issue as their main campaign banner.
Of course.
But not in Denmark. There, the strict migration agenda didn't stay in the hands of the right, it was absorbed by the Social Democrats. It was an unexpected turn.
Democrats here need to
A
do the
party
same
traditionally
thing.
associated
Else
with
they'll-
open
else they
and
won't win
humanitarian
anything.
policies, decided to toughen its stance on immigration and take over ideas that had previously belonged to the nationalist Danish People's Party. By pulling the anti-immigration
You
consensus
pushed them
toward
back.
the center-left, the Social Democrats managed to neutralize the right,
Boom.
which lost its main issue.
Boom.
The Danish People's Party, which in 2015 had become the country's second largest political force, went into a steep decline, and in the 2024 European elections, barely managed to keep minimal representation.
Almost like when people feel represented, you can stay in power. Crazy concept. Something that the Democrats in America were pretty much allowing to happen. Millions upon millions of people were entering our fucking borders. We haven't seen those types of numbers. Unregulated numbers. That's the issue. And the Democrats want to make this like an emotional, like, feel-good problem and try to reach with your heartstrings and guilt trip you. No. No, 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 no. They need to stop fucking doing that. And they need to wake up and realize and go, look, this is a problem. We're not representing the American people well. Or at least our messaging isn't getting over that well. You got people voting Democrat because they voted Democrat. You got people voting Republican because they've always voted Republican. There's no critical thinking anymore. They don't want you to be a critical thinker. They would rather you just be a simple yes man and accept everything. But now people are waking up and going, we don't want that. We don't do that here. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
What strengthened the right in other countries ended up consolidating the left in Denmark, and that political paradox is a key part of the model. Harsh migration policies weren't presented as a victory for the right, but as a state policy, adopted by the country's most stable
That's what the
political
Democrats
force.
did. They're just giving it to the
In
Republicans about
2025,
this issue.
when Denmark took over the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, Mette Frederiksen brought her migration agenda to the continental stage.
Oh,
From the podium
clown
of the
show
European
in the
Parliament
European
in
Union?
Strasbourg, the Danish Prime Minister argued that Europe had to reduce migration flows and regain control of its external borders. It wasn't a fringe position, but the roadmap Denmark wanted to bring into negotiations with the 27 member states. At a time when migration policy was dividing the Union, the Danish Social Democrat was calling for a shift that had previously been pushed only by nationalist parties. But it's important to understand that while Denmark...
Hey, and by the way, for the left, she's scary for them. She's scary for them because she agrees with a lot of their social beliefs, but she understands where the problems lie. I respect that. I would vote for her. Simple.
Denmark is putting up barriers to humanitarian asylum, it's also opening selective labor channels to attract people who can contribute to the economy right away.
You don't want to entirely shut immigration down. I know that's what it sounds like I'm saying, but like I think it does need to be like a temporary pause to fix our at-home issues, and then we can open the door again for immigration, and that's okay. America's always done that. It's okay to sit there and admit that we may need to put a pause on it because now we're seeing Americans struggle. Like college kids can't find work. People can't find opportunity. Jobs are getting replaced now more than ever before because of AI. So when you got all these issues, it's like I have to go to competition with AI on top of immigration and on top of people in my own college world. I have so much competition for just a small, minute jobs available. That's a problem. Part of that's the blame on the college system, and that could be a rant for another time. But the main other reasons are because of this. For America, H-1B visas and immigrants. And also, by the way, they're getting paid less. These corporations are pretty much guilt tripping, or not guilt tripping, but they're kind of like controlling every aspect of their life. Because these people come over on these H-1B visas, they stay in hotels, or they stay in apartments that are all either, some are owned by the corporation themselves or owned by some program that they're in. And so imagine one day they just stop showing up to work. Like, I want to get paid more. I'm going to stop showing up to work. Oh, the corporation will be like, oh, well, we pay for literally everything you do, so get out. So it's almost like this serfdom that we have now, this modern day slavery with these people. And it also hurts us as well. Like right now, if the medical work, and I believe this was a stat in the United Kingdom, if they just canceled their immigration right now, they would receive, like, and specifically when it comes to their healthcare system, their wait times would go down tremendously, and on top of it, the healthcare workers would receive a 20 to 30% pay increase because they would be more valuable. There'd be more of a demand. They need more demand, so they have to pay you guys fairly. So, people don't think of it in that lens on how it's hurting all of us as well, as much as it's hurting the immigrant as well.
The so-called positive list scheme identifies professions where there's a shortage of workers, doctors, engineers, skilled technicians, and makes it easier for foreigners with those qualifications to come in. So, the Danish paradox is that it combines very tough restrictions with very specific incentives. It doesn't try to shut itself off from the world. It tries to filter who gets in and under what conditions. It's a model that may look contradictory, but it follows a clear logic: protecting the welfare state, maintaining social cohesion, and securing the talent an advanced economy needs to survive in the future. That's it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to watch the next one.
Please subscribe to this gentleman. He only has 20 videos? Man, these are really high quality videos. I mean, I could tell it takes a little time for him to pump out with some of these. But no, these are, again, another great video from the Arrow. Please drop this guy some support. Help him grow his channel. Because, we want honest, real journalism like this. This is good. This is real. And I would rather support these guys more than anybody else beforehand. But yeah, quick, short note. I mean, this is a great video. This video really addresses a lot of the issues. And it also shows how it shows how Denmark adapted to the real problem and how they fixed it. Even the socialist Democrats, and how they adapted to the issue and how they fixed it. So that's what I mean is this issue, it's going to take a little time for some to really grasp it because they have to be personally affected by this. But this will get to a point even in America where it's going to become a non-discussable issue. It's no discussion here. This has to be an issue that we got to all unify under and go, look, this is a class issue. We're not making money as young people. We're not making money as workers, middle class workers. We're not making money. We're all struggling here. Prices are still getting expensive, and simple policy like this could easily sway votes and can easily sway the economy in a positive direction. There's arguments to say that it can hurt, but I don't believe in that. I genuinely don't. Like for a country like America, like Denmark, yeah, there's like 6 million people. So when you have 40,000, 80,000 people come over, there's more of an impact, right? I know through most of the UK's time that they were averaging around also, I think, 40 to 50,000 a year. Mostly from, like I mentioned earlier, Yugoslavia, mostly from European countries, Eastern Bloc countries. So when you got these people coming over here, there's less of a cultural difference. They're still culturally with their own history and everything they've gone through, but there's less of like a European divide or a Western ideology divide. And again, these are tough conversations that people don't want to have. So drop a support to this guy called The Arrow. He makes great content, really good content. So he seems to be consistent with this content. I think he looks like he posts a video every week. So try to support this guy. It's pretty good. So thank you guys for watching. If you made it this long, drop a support to my channel if you like kind of the content I do. I try to do a little bit of everything, trying to hit some of the important issues, right? So, all right, guys. Thank you guys for the support. drop a comment below if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, just thought-provoking questions. I'm all here for it. So thank you guys.